This is my forever computer. It's a Centurion mini computer that's been a mainstay of the channel for a couple of years now. And it's actually so big that I had to use the 24mm lens on the camera as opposed to the 50mm lens that I normally use in order just to get it all to fit in the frame. And when I say it's my forever computer, I absolutely mean it. I love this thing to death. And you know what? Before we continue on with the rest of the episode, I want you to pause it right now and then go down into the comments and write what your forever computer is. What is the one machine that you love above everything else and you're gonna take to the grave with you? Because for me, it's this big blue beast right here. And actually on this machine, I haven't had it spun up in about a month and a half because at the end of 2024, I declared it was vacuum tube computer or bust. We were putting everything else in the room on hold until the UE1 homebrew vacuum tube computer that I'm building and the Bendix G15, a full-fledged tube computer from 1956, were both executing code. And we only barely made it, but we made it. Both of them are successfully executing code. Now they both still have a lot of problems with them, but we hit our goal. And so that means that we can greet the new year with something other than a vacuum tube computer. And I can think of no better way to say hello to 2025 than by spinning this big blue beast back up and maybe working on it a little bit. But if you have recently joined and you are unfamiliar with what this is, other than the fact that it's just behind me all the time, I'll give you a quick rundown on it. It's a Centurion mini computer that was built here in Texas, just north of me by about 2 hours up in Dallas, and it has a pretty unique CPU in it. This particular one has the CPU6, which is a full micro-coded CPU based around the AM2901 4-bit bit slice ALU, and it implements a completely custom instruction set. It is not shared with anything else under the sun, not x86, not Z80, not 6502, but it is still an 8-bit CPU. But unlike a lot of home computers from the same era, it has a lot more than 16-bit address space. It can address up to a full 256K of memory. And this particular machine has the full 256K in it. Now here's where it gets interesting, because that custom CPU and that custom instruction set are not really all that powerful for doing like hardcore single actions. Where this machine really excels is in large amounts of storage for the year and multi-user. So this machine has a hodgepodge of parts on it ranging from about 1978 to 1983. And for multi-user right now, there is a MUX card in it that has 4 ports on it, so we can have up to 4 serial terminals going on at once. However, the backplane has many more slots. You can populate it with many more MUX cards, and you could actually push one of these up to having 32 simultaneous users. The way the CPU is designed is that it can handle that, which I think is absolutely stunning. Now for big storage, we currently have 4 hard drives attached to this thing. This one right here is a CDC Hawk drive. It has a 5MB fixed platter and a 5MB removable platter. This is a pack that you can just pull out and swap, so you can change 5MB at a time. We have one more Hawk drive over here. This one is here graciously from the Large Scale Systems Museum, and we did recently get it going. So we have a combined 20 megabytes of data storage going on right there. And both of these are controlled by the same pair of Disk 1, Disk 2 controller cards down here in the card cage. Now above that, we have this 8-inch floppy drive going on right here. This is actually courteous of Curious Mark. Now right next to that, we have a CDC Finch drive. This is a self-contained 8-inch hard drive that is 32 megabytes. And both of these drives are controlled by the FFC card down in the card cage or the Finch floppy controller card. But if you want to go for real big storage, you got to go over to the CMD based stuff. And that's going to be this big boy right over here. This is the Phoenix drive. Now these came in a couple of different flavors. This particular one was donated very graciously by Mr. Reed. Thank you very much for that. But they could go all the way up to 96 megabytes. And those are controlled by the CMD card, and it can control up to 3 of those. So you could, I think I did the math to figure out how to best populate the backplane, but you could push this thing to over half a gigabyte of storage space in like early 1983. But all of this storage doesn't really mean a whole lot if you can't take the data that you've created and punch it out on paper, which is what This big blue beast over here this is a Data 100 printer. It's a 125 line per minute chain printer. And we got it going in a previous episode, and it's pretty wild. It spits paper out of the top at a pretty prodigious rate, but it still only works like 70% of the time because it's a printer, and printers are all inherently demon-possessed mechanisms that require the moon to be in a specific phase and the stars to align correctly in order to actually print anything. Printers are just straight evil. But all of this, including the EDS PC that's sitting on top, pretty much works, with the exception of the Phoenix drive. We haven't got it going, and that's one thing that we are definitely going to do this year in 2025. But before we get to that, right now there's only a single MUX card in here, and it can only support up to 4 data terminals. But I would like to support many more than that. Currently though, I only have one more MUX card that I can slide into it. So we're going to do that and push it up to 8 data terminals total. But that MUX card is not working. It is broken. So what we're doing today is we're going to get that MUX card going and get the operating system here genned for 8 terminals, because I got something pretty exciting that I want to do with all 8 of those ports. So we got a lot of work to do. Maybe, I don't know, might be easy. I have no clue what's wrong with the MUX card. So I'm just assuming it's going to be a lot of work because that's how everything's been. So let's get to it. Getting the Centurion fired fully up is just a tiny bit involved. The first step is to turn on the power strips back here. This will supply power to both Hawk drives, which will kick their cooling fans off, as well as power up the Finch drive, which starts spinning right up immediately, as you can see here. In order to get the Hawk drive spun up, we gotta hit the start-stop button on the front of the drive, and I'll hit it on the primary drive first and then over on the LSSM drive next. And after a 60-second spin-up cycle, it'll load the heads and illuminate the ready light if all went well. With all 3 drives powered up, let's get some power into the printer next. It takes a second for the chain to get up to speed, but once it is, you can hit the print button on the front and the ready light will come on. Next, let's get the EDS PC up, since it'll be acting as a second data terminal. The power switch is actually a key switch on the side of the box, but after the internal MFM drive spins up, we're booted fully into DOS. The EDS PC is a secondary data terminal though, so let's flip the power switch on the ADS Regent 100 that is the console terminal. And finally, let's power up the actual computer. Just insert the key and give it a turn, and if all goes well, we get a D = prompt. From here, we type H1, and the Hawk drive will fire off 3 RTZs in rapid succession. Then it'll read in the Whipple, check the synth switch status, and start booting into the operating system. After asking for a date and time, it'll say CRT0 ready, and that means we're fully booted up into the OS. I just need to type a quick .sta to see the status of the machine, and it looks like the LSSM Hawk is feeling a bit ornery this morning, and the fixed platter isn't showing up just yet, but this usually fixes itself once it heat soaks for a bit. Currently, the OS thinks there is just one data terminal, but if we hop over to the EDS PC and type Control-C from Procom Plus, the OS sees this and registers it as the second user. Then it's free to run its own commands and applications completely separate of the primary user on the console terminal. So far, so good. But let's test the printer, just to make sure that everything is working as it should be. And yep, the ribbon has dried out a little, but that's a fully functioning printer, which means this beast of a machine is 100% working perfectly now. I absolutely adore this thing. It's just so good looking and tough as nails. And look at that, after refreshing the status screen, the LSSM Hawk has woken up and is visible in the OS again. I can even do a .dir3 and see the contents of that particular platter. It finally got warm enough to come into spec. I apologize for the frame rate sync issues here though. The camera was really unhappy with the refresh rate of this CRT, but still everything's working at 100% now, which is epic. Now within the status screen here, we can see how many terminals are currently in use. Right now it reads CRT0 and CRT1, so let's get something hooked up to CRT2. I'll pull out this gorgeous little TI Insight data terminal, power it up, and while it's warming up, I'll run a little script to set up the third port on the MUX card to 300 baud, 8 data bits, no parity, and 1 stop bit, which is what the Insight is expecting.
Back on the Insight, a quick Control-C informs the OS we're good, and then I can type .sta and away it goes. 300 baud and 40 columns is a terrible combination for the Centurion, but hey, it's a proper third user logged into the system. We can see the status screen now shows CRT 0, 1, and 2. Let's see if we can fill that out completely. And we'll do that with this absolutely gorgeous Lear Siegler ADM3A. We'll plug it into the last port on the MUX card, hit Control-C, and then type .sta, and look at that, the ADM works straight away. Now, because it's not ADS emulation, it doesn't interpret clear screen commands correctly, but it's working well enough. And there we go, 4 simultaneous users. That's just so awesome. I love this thing, man. What an absolute tank. Hadn't been powered up in a month and a half, and it just everything worked. It all came up and worked perfectly. The Large Scale Systems Museum Hawk that's over here did give us a little bit of grief, so we're gonna have to dive into that in the future. But if you give it about 20 minutes, it does warm up, I guess, and starts working totally fine and continues to work perfectly for the rest of the day. And I guess the moon was in the right phase today because the printer actually printed. Everything you see here worked perfectly with the exception of the Phoenix drive up here, which we're going to get into in a future episode, and this MUX card right here. You saw that once I had the ADM3A, the TI Insight, the ADS Regent 100, and the EDS-PC all hooked up, we had 4 data terminals running on the operating system, and that actually maxed out the MUX card that is currently in there. So if I want to go past that, I need another functioning MUX card. Now, why do I want to go past that? Well, it's cool, I guess. I mean, how cool would it be to have 8 terminals hooked up to this thing? But also there's a lot of other interesting things that I want to do with the additional MUX ports. This TI Insight is a terrible terminal to have close to it, but it has a built-in modem. And if I can get some kind of homemade telephone system going on inside of this room, I could technically hook a modem up to the Centurion and then remote in over a phone line on the TI Insight. That would be absolutely awesome, I think. Also, I've got the mini Centurion over there, the CPU5 Centurion, and I would love to run a serial cable between the two and set up file transfer between both of those. So I need a port dedicated for that on all of those. So I need more ports, So this MUX card is our answer. This will give us an additional 4 RS-232 ports coming out of this thing for a total of 8. However, this thing is totally dead. Every time I try to put it in, I get absolutely 0 response out of it. So how can we test this? Well, we can plug it in on this here, which is a riser card. So this will push the card all the way out of the front of the card cage so I can get the scope on here and start scoping signals and see if we're hitting it correctly. And I can test this actually without even using any of the hard drives. So I can do it when it's relatively quiet in the room. And I can do that with this diag card that Ken Romaine hooked us up with. And it's been probably the most important piece to this Centurion puzzle. So Ken, this thing is just amazing. Thank you so much. But we're going to put it to use today because there is a diagnostic test on here specifically for the MUX port. Well, there's a couple of them. There's an interrupt and a non-interrupt, but the one we're looking for is one that just sends the same letter on repeat to the MUX, and then we can start testing the MUX card and figuring out what's gone wrong. And hopefully it's just some simple 7400 series chip that we can desolder, replace, and then this whole thing springs to life. But the only way to find out is to get all this stuff plugged in and get to work. Let's get the known good MUX card out so we can test the non-working card. After unplugging all the serial cables plugged into it, I just give it a quick pull on the tab and it slides right out. Then I'll slide in the riser card and connect the MUX card to the edge connector on the riser. After propping the card up with some notebooks, I'll pop in the diag card and set it to test 04, which should send the letter U on repeat to MUX port 0. And as we can see, nothing at all on the terminal. Changing up to test 05, this should be an echo back test. And again, absolutely nothing at all on the terminal. The card is completely non-responsive. I was all prepared for like a super hardcore in-depth troubleshooting session with the scope, and I had the schematic open and I was thinking about all the crazy logic that's going on in here. And then I said, wait,
check the basics first. So that's what we're gonna do. This dip switch right here is suspect because these dip switches get old and make bad connections. And this is the dip switch that selects the MUX card number. And the CPU, I think, can support up to 15 MUX cards, although the operating system can't support that many. But that means that you have this dip switch here that you can turn certain switches on and off to tell the computer where this MUX card is sitting. And if this dip switch isn't working, it may be sitting in the wrong place. So let's check the resistance across the pins of this dip switch right here, because they should all be closed. And yeah, that's 1.11K. If I check the next one here, again, 1.11K. It should be 0. So if it's 1100, that is a genuine problem. And they are all over 1K. So either the dip switch has gone bad or it's just a little dirty. I'm gonna try and spray some deoxit in there and rock it back and forth a bunch of time, and maybe we can get it to come back to life. I've had this revive bad dip switches before, so we'll give it a shot. Just soak it in deoxit, then work each individual switch back and forth a ton of times, working the deoxit into the switch body itself to hopefully break loose any corrosion that's built up inside. But unfortunately, this time it didn't work. So out came the trusty desoldering iron so we can remove the dip switch entirely. A little prying and it pops right out. Then I can just give the board a quick clean, pop a new dip switch in, and solder it down. And after giving it a quick test with the multimeter, the dip switch is now working like expected. New dip switch installed. Maybe we just got lucky, and that's all it was. We're on test 4, which should send the same character on repeat to the terminal. So let's hit the button and yes! Oh, that's awesome. All right, let's go to test 5. Test 5 should be a repeat, so anything I typed, yeah, coming straight through, no problem. And then if I go to test 6, that is the same test, but now includes the daisy chain interrupts, and that is working perfectly. That's awesome. All right, I think we're ready to get both MUX cards plugged back in and see if we can get 8 terminals going. I can't believe it was just a bad dip switch. All right, we're fully booted up back into the operating system now, and because it's a little colder out today, the LSSM Hawk fixed platter only is a little upset, but it doesn't matter because we're not doing anything with that platter right now anyways. What I want to do is get essentially 8 ports set up on this machine, and right now you can see we only have 4. This is 0, 1, 2, 3 right here, and I've got 2 terminals set up. I've got this primary terminal here that we're using the ADS 100, and then I've got the EDS PC set up as CRT1. I have the ADM3A down here, and it's plugged into the topmost port of the second MUX card, but since it's not showing up here, we're going to have to actually tell the operating system to look for that second MUX card, and we're going to do that with a piece of software called p.sysgen. So we're just going to go ahead and run that. It's not in a library. The file is etosn. That is on disk number 1. And this is our menu here. So we've got constants, partitions, MUX devices, disk drives, printers, so on and so forth. Obviously, we're looking for MUX devices, so we're going to hit 3 there. And oh, that's interesting. It is already set up for that. I mean, they're all set up as region 40s, but it shouldn't matter. So let's try hitting Control C on the ADM3A here and see what happens. Absolutely nothing. So the operating system is not seeing that MUX card. That could be because I still have the dip switches set incorrectly. I'm gonna try and change that right quick, and then we'll give this all one more shot. All right, I popped the MUX card out and I changed the dip switch settings. Maybe I just had it set wrong. So let's hop back into, we'll just do a status here just to make sure that everything is okay. Okay, yeah, we're back into the status, and actually our LSSM Hawk drive here has actually finally warmed up enough and we've got access to it, but still we're only seeing 4 CRTs here, even though the computer is ginned for it. Let me hit Control C on the ADM3A down here. Oh, that says CRT4 ready. Okay, if I do a status on it, it does load up. Okay. Yeah, okay, so we've got CRT 014. 4 is definitely the port on that other MUX card. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna unplug one CRT from one port, move it to the next port, and then hit Control-C again, and it should log as a new CRT. And maybe we can push it off the bottom here and get that next 4 showing up. So we'll just do that with the ADM because it's nice and easy. All right, we'll hit Control-C on the ADM again. CRT5 ready. If I do a status over on this one again, well, you can see we filled it up with CRT 0, 1, 4, and 5. All right, let's go to the next port, see what happens here. All right, Control-C one more time. Oh, okay, that's interesting. It says stand by. I was not expecting that. All right, I think I'm starting to circle in on it, and it's because I'm unfamiliar with how they're using the word partition. So it's here, it says partition size is 24K. So the number of users that are allowed within the operating system is not just the MUX devices that are available, but also the number of partitions that are available. So let's go back to psysgen here. It's gonna ask me for library, it's gonna ask me for the file name at OSN, it's on disk 1. All right, so number 3 was MUX devices, number 2 is partitions. And if we go into number 2, we can see here that we have partition number 0, 1, 2, and 3. They've got all sorts of disk defaults and priorities and stuff. I don't particularly know what that means. So let's come down to here and do 4, 5, 6, 7. That should be a total of 8 partitions. To get out of this, we want to do a Control-B for enter, then 9 for end program. No, we don't want a configuration listing. Okay, that should have saved it, but now we have to reboot the system. So I'll go ahead and hit the load opsys button on the front and gets us back to the D equals prompt. We'll say H1. It's going to take it a second. I'll just fast forward through this for you guys. Okay, we'll do a .sta here, and yeah, all right. All of our partitions are showing up, 0 through 7 here. Let's start loading them up. I'll hit Control-C for CRT1. Let's select, we'll just go in order here. Then we'll do a Control-C on this one. That should give us CRT2. Again, we should get CRT3. We're moving over to the second MUX card now. Do a Control-C again, that'd be CRT4. Do it again, Control-C, that's CRT5. We're already beyond what we were capable of before changing that setting. We'll do this one here, this should be CRT6. And finally, the last most port down here, CRT7. All right, back up here, we'll run the status again, and we should see all 8 CRTs filled out. If I do a status on this one, you can see that CRT7 is working completely perfectly. So we got essentially 8 data terminals functioning on this as far as the operating is concerned, but clearly you can see there's only 3 data terminals going on right now. So the real trick here is to see, can I get 8 functioning data terminals in this room, all hooked up to the Centurion at once? This is gonna be an absolute mess. I'm gonna have to make a bunch of cables, but I think it's gonna be awesome to see 8 terminals working simultaneously on a single machine. Oh, that's gonna be cool. Oh, it's gonna be, this is already super cool. Time to try and find 8 data terminals. We have the ADS Regent 100 and the EDS PC already on the system, plus this ADS Regent 200 from the Mini Centurion. And of course we have the Lear-Siegler ADM3A that we've been using up to now. Then I'll grab the old ADS Regent 40 that used to be on the Mini Centurion, as well as this very cool Weiss WY60 that I recently got from AJ at Forgotten Machines. And we can't forget the adorable TI Insight Series 10. I also pulled out the Deck Rainbow, but being the amazing YouTuber that I am, I forgot to film that. Here we go, 8 data terminals hooked up simultaneously to the Centurion. It took a massive amount of effort, but to prove that these are in fact all working off of the same machine, I've got them all loaded up with a .sta, a status command here. and I'll just go through and hit enter on all of these and we can get it all going. But keep in mind, the status command hits the floppy drive, so this thing's gonna be making a racket and it's gonna run kind of slow for all of them because the bottleneck is the floppy. So let's go. Return, 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 and return. There we go. They're slowly updating, but they should all have pretty much the exact same screen going on. How cool is that? I said it took a colossal amount of effort. That effort was absolutely not on the Centurion. This thing is a tank and it had zero problems with it. The effort was all in trying to get 8 data terminals working simultaneously, but we got all 8 going, and I had no ulterior motive here. There's no reason for me to have 8 data terminals hooked up to this simultaneously right here in this one spot. I've essentially created an entire 1980s office in a like tiny little square for a single person. This is crazy. But I have proven definitively that 8 users can use this machine simultaneously, and that is something that we're gonna try and do in the future, only not having 8 people in this room, having 8 people from anywhere in the world. And we're gonna do that using a bit of equipment that is the newest piece of equipment in this room. I've got it hidden behind the machine here so it's not obvious, but that should allow us to get 8 people connected simultaneously to the Centurion globally. And I think that is gonna be very epic. So I wanna thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.